Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Simon. In this video, I'm going to cover the Unix Administration grade lab called DNS. And I'm not going to lie to you, DNS is easily the hardest lab you have to do in the entire Unix Administration course. I mean, it's just brutal for students. It can be so frustrating because what makes this lab difficult is that there is so much to do. And that means there's so much room for error. And the littlest error can prevent the entire system from working. And I'm not lying to you. The littlest bracket that you forget to put in can mess up everything. And if you watch my video for routing, you'll remember that in the routing lab, I showed you that in the practice lab, most of all of this was stuff that you already knew how to do. There's very little that was new. Everything was really easy in my opinion, and a lot of the stuff that you saw, like this big stuff here, was usually just showing you what the output should look like. But that's not the case for DNS. For DNS, everything you see here you have to do. And this big guy right here, this is a whole brand new file that you have to create. You have to create this file, and then in the VI editor, you have to put all of this in there. So like I said, there's a lot of room for error because you don't have to do this once. You have to do this multiple times. Even here, you're going to modify this file and you're going to make sure you put this in that file, but you have to make sure you put it in the right place. And look at how many semicolons and brackets there are, these quotes. The littlest mess up, the littlest thing that you forget to put in there can mess everything up. And it's just frustrating because it could be impossible to find where you messed anything up. You can look at the file, and especially if you're doing this and it's taking you a long time, everything is just going to look the same to you. You're going to look and be like, that's the same, and trying to find that you forgot this bracket right here could be impossible. And here's another thing that sucks, is when I did this grade lab for the first time, I thought I did everything right. And I actually believed I did everything right because I could ping SO1 and W1 from each other. So just to give you an idea with DNS, once you have the system in place, you no longer need to use the host file. So the host file, if you remember, is like an alias. Basically, in the host file, you said the IP address of 10.1.1.10 belongs to the name W1. So SO1 says ping W1, the system knew it was actually going to ping the IP address of 10.1.1.10, and vice versa. In the host files, you'll see SO1 belongs to the IP address of 10.1.1.20, so when W1 says ping SO1, it knew it was actually saying ping 10.1.1.20. So with DNS, you no longer need to rely on the host file. So if you get rid of those entries in the host file and you try to ping each other by each other's names, it'll work. So what I did when I did my grade lab is I said, okay, SO1, ping W01, and it worked. And then I went to W01 and I said, okay, W1, ping SO1, and it worked. So it was like, all right, I did everything perfectly. Let's just run this script, submit it on Dropbox, and I'm done this lab. So I go on W01, go to Firefox, and sure enough, it says I have no connection to the internet anymore. Somehow, and I still don't know how, somehow I prevented W01 from accessing the internet because of my DNS records. And that just frustrated me because I couldn't figure it out, and I spent hours trying to figure it out to the point where I just said, I'm not going to search anymore because everything's just a blur. I'm just going to do this again and hope that it works. I did it all again, and it worked. So I did it all again. I could ping each other, and now W01 had access to the internet. I have no idea what I did wrong. I still don't. But that's how easy it is to mess things up in this lab. It's not like previous labs. If you remember installing and updating software, there is a command that you learn called yum install. And if you say yum install httpd on the SO1 virtual machine and it comes up with errors, you can usually figure out where you're going wrong. You could probably say to yourself eventually, even if it takes a little bit of time, you'll probably eventually say, you know what, SO1 doesn't have access to the internet, so it doesn't know where to find the files. So if I'm going to install httpd, I'm going to make sure that there's a DVD ISO image with the files on it that is mounted before I install anything. So you're going to mount the DVD ISO image, and then you're going to say yum install httpd, and it'll work. You can find out where you're going wrong if you just put a little bit of thought into it. With this lab, it is almost impossible to find where you're going wrong sometimes. So I definitely sympathize with you that you're going through this. It is a tough one to go through. Even this, you're going to see in this grade lab, a lot of the extra stuff that you have to do isn't even in the practice lab. You have to go to this link right here, and it says, this is where you can learn everything you need to. And you're going to be like, oh my God, look at all of this. I don't want to go through all of this. That's just too much. And thankfully, most of it you don't have to go through. There's just a few things, and I'm going to explain in the video. But it is really overwhelming. So I definitely sympathize with you. But with that being said, what I want to do is go through this. I am going to heavily rely on this practice lab so that I can make sure everything is done right, because everything we need is going to be in here for the most part. Anything that isn't in the practice lab, I will explain to you. I'm getting it from here. But for the most part, I'm just going to explain to you. I'm not going to go in here and show you. I'm just going to tell you what you need to do. But please go through the practice lab yourself. Try it the best you can. If you have any questions about it, let me know. Try the grade lab on your own, because it's the best way to learn. But if you are stuck, or if for some reason you just feel completely lost, then watch this video. And like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them in any way that I can. Okay? So let's go through this grade lab. First thing we're going to do is go into VirtualBox, and let's get rid of any previous virtual machines that we have in here called W1 or SO1. So we're going to remove them, delete all files. Make sure that you have your OVA file, obviously, so we can get brand new SO1 and W1 virtual machines into VirtualBox. But we also want this DVD ISO image, because we have to install bind and bind utilities. So make sure you have both of these, otherwise you're not going to be able to do this lab. Alright, so we're going to go to File, Import Appliance, find that OVA file. Mine is right here. And open it, hit Next. And you can leave the settings, you can modify it, whatever you want, but the way that it comes up is just fine. So I'm just going to import it. You're going to see it's not going to make much of a difference if I do actually increase any of the numbers. So we're just going to wait for this to actually import, and then we'll get into it. Basically, this is what we're going to do. I'm just going to tell you right now. It says design requirements. Hosts on the Blue network should only have access to the Blue network and not the open internet. So that makes sense. SO1 should have no access to the internet. W01, this port should not have any access to the internet, but this port, the black port or the black network port, should. So don't be confused by that. All of our host names, SO1 and W1, should be maintained by a single DNS primary server. So it tells us that SO1 is going to be our primary server, so that's all you need to know. W1 needs to have access to the open internet and access to the internal name server. So basically what I just said, W1 is still going to have access to the internet on the black network, but W1 is also going to have access to this name server. So it's going to have access to the blue and the black network the way it normally does, so that shouldn't be confusing. And then it says use bind as our name server, so we're going to install bind. So now that these guys are there, go ahead and load them up. Implementation strategy. It says bind on SO1. This is going to be the primary DNS server for the domain example.com containing SO1 and W01. No caching behavior, which says recursion, and you're going to be like, I don't know what that means, but don't worry, I'll explain it. And it says no forwarding. And no forwarding, basically there is a setting that you can put into this file right here that's called forwarding, but we never really learn it, so you don't have to worry about that. He's just letting you know we're not going to do anything with forwarding, but if you just leave this file the way it is, you don't even have to worry about that, so you can just forget about that entirely. I'm just going to log into Alice, user pass. Now bind on W1 says it is going to have a caching server. It's going to be the slave or the secondary server for example.com. So this is new. This isn't something that you learned in the practice lab. And then we are going to make sure that our resolve configuration is going to look like this. So it's going to look a little bit different. There's an error right here. It should be .com. So if a lot of you are getting errors because you're putting in example.co and you're trying to ping something with example.com, it won't work. You have to make sure you're putting in example.com. So just so you know. All right. So here we go. We've got W01. Let's just go in, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install bind and bind utils if I need to. For W01, you should only need to install bind. So go in as root, say su, password is admin pass, and then say yum install bind, and that should be good. We have access to the internet right now, so it will find it, it will install it, no problems. So we'll just wait for that. There we go. And once it's done, you can try saying yum bind utils, but it should tell us that we already have it, so there's nothing to do, which it does right here. So let's just go into SO1, and we're going to log in as root. Remember, when we want to install something on SO1, we need that DVD ISO image, so you're going to click on devices, optical drives, and click on the ISO file. If you need to, go ahead and click choose disk image and find it, open it, and then you're going to say mount dev cd-rom, hit enter, and now we can say yum install bind, and then yum install bind utils. Okay, and that way you have everything that you need on SO1. SO1 definitely needs to have yum install bind utils. W01 does not. So we're going to hit enter, yes, and there we go. Here is what I'm going to tell you right off the bat. A lot of videos, I try to make sure that every time I do something on SO1, I do it in this virtual machine window right here. And every time I do something on W01, I do it in this virtual machine window right here. But because of this lab, and because there's a lot of things that we're going to have to put into a file, it is easier to copy and paste. And the only way that you're going to be able to copy and paste is by doing it through W01. So for this actual video, I'm going to actually go into SO1 through W01. I'm going to SSH into the SO1 virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to minimize SO1, and I'm going to make this guy a little bit bigger. I am going to clear this and go right into SO1. So I'm going to say SSH root at SO1, hit enter. Type in the password, which is admin pass, and now I'm in SO1. So this entire time that I'm going to basically just do everything I need to do on SO1 first, and then I'll do everything on W01. So for now, just know I'm in SO1, and that's really important to know because you're going to be confused otherwise. But trust me, this is the easiest way to complete what you're going to have to do, because you don't want to have to write all this out. If you're actually writing this out, there's a lot of room for error. Easiest way to do it is to basically copy and paste it in there. So open up Firefox and get that ready. Go into eLearn and get the practice lab up on eLearn. Trust me, it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. Okay, so let's go to the grade lab again, just while this is loading. So we have the diagram right here. So it says that SO1 again is going to be our primary, and then we're going to have W01 act as our secondary. Don't worry about the resolver for the period. Don't even worry about trying to understand that. Just understand that SO1 is our primary, W01 is going to be secondary just in case the primary doesn't work, and we're going to make sure that we can ping each other, but we're also going to make sure W01 has access to the open internet. Now, here is some information that's going to help you greatly. It says hints. You saw most of what you will need to do for this lab when you completed the first DNS lab, which is the practice lab right here. It says here are a few hints to help you along the way, and these are really good hints. Now it does give you this link that you can go to and you can learn this stuff, and that's where I learned the stuff. For example, the slave, the secondary server, when I click on it, it's going to give me this guy down here, which is basically what I'm going to have to put into for W01. But anyway, let's go back here. The first real hint is this. The SO1 configuration is very similar to the configuration we built on NS1 on the practice lab. This guy right here. Except we do not allow recursion. Okay? So there's only one thing that we really need to change, and that's that we do not allow recursion. And that's what it was basically saying right up here where it says no caching behavior recursion. and I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy. There's just basically a little setting that says allow recursion, and it says yes or no. And you're just going to put down no instead of yes. In the practice lab, we said yes, but in this case, we're going to say no. And then it says here, the W01 configuration is very similar to the configuration we built on NS1, so the same thing up here, except only listen to the loopback interface. So if we go into this practice lab, you're going to see right here, it says listen on port, and we put in this. Well, for W01, we're only going to keep it as this. We're not going to put any IP address here. So you're going to see that when I do it. Then it says has a zone with type slave, for example. Okay, so instead of putting the master zones that we did up here, which you'll see again, we're going to be putting in one zone called basically slave, and it's going to be the slave or the secondary, for example.com. And then it says limit the amount of memory we use for the DNS cache. That's something that I didn't actually find in that link that he gave us. I had to Google it myself when I did it for the first time, but I'm going to show you what it is. It's a very simple setting. And it doesn't matter what you give it in terms of how much memory you're going to allow for the cache, but he just wants to make sure that it's in there. So I don't even think he actually checks for it in the actual script. So I don't know for sure, but I don't think he did. I think that was one that I thought, that's weird. I put all this effort into here and I didn't even get marked for it. So anyways, when you're in eLearn, by the way, go to UNIX admin and just get the practice lab for DNS up and running. And like I said, you're going to see when we go through this, it is difficult, but if you follow what I do, it won't be too bad. So I'm going to grab this guy. Now that we know what we have to do, I'm just going to minimize this and I'm going to make W1 bigger so that we can just focus on that. I know what we need to do. You can refer to this. Anytime I refer to anything, I will go back here if we need to. But for the most part, we know SO1s are primary. W01 is going to be secondary. It needs to have access to the internet. We know that SO1 has to have no recursion. We know that W01 needs to make sure it only listens to the loopback interface, has a zone of type it has a zone with type slave, and it's going to limit the memory that we are going to use for a DNS cache. So if that's confusing for you, don't worry, I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to minimize this. Let's make this guy bigger. There we go. We can put him over here. And what we're going to do is, remember, I'm on SO1. The very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this file, because that's, remember, it says it's going to be basically the same thing that we did in here, except for a minor adjustment for SO1. So you can basically follow the practice lab to a T. Just make sure you're writing everything properly. So let's edit this file. vi/etc named.configuration or conf. Hit enter, and you're going to see all of this information. What we got to do is this, where it says listen on port 53. We already have the loopback IP address right here, which is fine, but we need to put in our IP address, so SO1's IP address. So it's going to be 10.1.1.20 and a semicolon. So remember, that's really important. Here we had 40 because 40 was NS1, but in this case we're going to be using SO1 as our name server. So make sure it's 20 and make sure you put that semicolon, otherwise that can mess things up. Next thing we're going to do is allow query, okay? And we're going to be putting the network here of 10.1.1.0 with a prefix of 24 with that semicolon. Make sure you put that in there. That's basically saying allow query from anyone on the blue network. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And go down here where it says localhost. Just before it, I'm going to put 10.1.1.0/24 and semicolon space. Okay, I hope you're following that, because like I said, if you mess up the semicolon or something like that, it all goes to hell. Trust me. Okay, so we had one restriction that's not on here that is on our actual grade lab, and it says we want to make sure that we do not allow recursion. So if I go back into W01, there's a setting right here. Right under allow query, it says recursion, yes. Our answer is no. We don't want that. Okay, so that's all you have to do for that so far. But now what we're going to want to do is put in our zone, because there's a zone that we're going to need. There's two zones technically. So you're going to see all this stuff here. I'm going to skip this for now. I'm just going to do everything I need to do on SO1. So I'm going to go down here, and this is where it says we want to put in this zone. This is where I suggest that you highlight it, because I'm in the virtual machine. You can see I'm in W1. You can copy it, go into root, and when you have it down here where you see where it says the first zone, just put it underneath the zone before the include stuff down here. Hit edit, hit paste, and there you go. Now you know it's basically put in exactly the way it is here. There should be no problems. Okay. What we also want to do is make sure that we have the ability to reverse lookup. So even though we're on part C and we're like, okay, let's do this, I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to add this in, because this is going to allow us to do reverse lookups. So you can copy this now, go back into here, hit enter a couple times, hit edit and paste, and there we go. So now that should be everything that I need to do in this file. So what I'm going to do is hit escape. I'm going to save it, so WQ with exclamation mark, hit enter. I'm still in SO1. So now what I have to do is this. We just said we are going to look up all the information that we need in this file right here, master/masterexample.com. So that sounds great, but we don't actually have this file yet. We have to create it. If you actually see, I'm going to show you. If I say cd-rom var named and then I type in master and hit tab, it doesn't come up because master doesn't exist. So I actually have to first make directory var named master, hit enter, and now I have to make this file. And the reason why I'm making this file is right here. We can see the folder master has a file named master.example.com. So I have to make a file called master.example.com in that master folder we just created. So let's do that. We're going to say vi var named master. Now it comes up, and we're going to say master.example.com. Hit enter, and you can see it's blank, which is perfect, but it also means that we have to put all of this information in. So it's easiest just to highlight it, copy it, go into here, make sure you have insert ready, so hit I to hit insert, click edit, paste, and then what I would suggest is scroll up to the very top. Sometimes, even though it didn't happen for me right now, sometimes it cuts off the first few words. I don't know why. Just make sure it's exactly the way that you want it. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So when you see this, this looks exactly the same. We have the, TTL 8640. That's there. And at the very bottom, we have SO1 in it's an A record. 10.1.1.20, that's there. So everything was put in there properly. Just make sure yours is, because in the past, I swear to God, for some reason, and I don't know why, when I've pasted it, I find that the top row gets cut off, and basically it gets cut off to around hours. I don't know why it happened, but yours might look like that. So make sure everything is in here the way it should be. In terms of brackets and stuff, you're not going to miss brackets. You just want to make sure it starts and ends the way that it starts and ends right there. So if you have that, you should be good. You should be able to edit it now. So don't save it. I know your instinct is, hey, I'm going to save it right now. But here's the problem. See this? Where my mouse is? Let me see if I can go down here. Right here, NS1. We don't have an NS1. So you have to get rid of that. So we're going to get rid of that and make it SO1, because everything that we're doing is going to be based on SO1. And then we're going to go down here, and anytime you see NS1, we're going to change it to SO1. So you can do a quick command in VI, and you can say replace NS1 with SO1, but there's not a lot of them, so I'm just going to do it manually. So right here we have NS1, we're going to say SO1, but remember with SO1, we have to change this IP address because our SO1 IP address is 20, so you're going to put 20 in here. So anytime you see SO1 or W1 with the IP address, for example, like this stuff down here, that's fine. Keep it the way it is. That's completely fine. Just make sure that anywhere you see NS1 or the IP address of 10.1.1.40, you change to SO1 with an IP address of 10.1.1.20. That's really all you need to do right here. So there's just this line right here that you needed to change. You just needed to change this guy right here, and then you needed to change this right here. So there's 3 spots that you're going to change. Once you've done that, save it. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to make this file right here, because we said here's our reverse lookup file. So we need to make sure we create this file, and we're going to put all of this stuff in there. So you're going to right click, copy, and we're going to say vi var named master, and now we're going to be calling it 10.1.1.0.rev. and again, I got that from right here. This is what we called our file, so that's why I'm calling it this right here. Hit enter, hit I to insert, click edit and paste, and just make sure again that it copied the whole thing, because this part can definitely mess up, but in my case it didn't, so I got very lucky. So once again with this file, we're going to change anything that has NS1 in it. So I'm going to just go up here, NS1 right here, I'm going to say is SO1, and then down here where it says NS1, I'm going to say SO1, and then right here I'm going to say SO1 as well. And instead of 40, we want it to be 20, because remember, the IP address ends in 20, not 40. And then we have this here. If you want, you can actually delete this. I mean, we already have the entry up here. You don't have to. It's up to you. But basically, if you want, you can delete it, because the entry is already up here. You don't have to do it again. So once you've done that, you make sure that anything with an NS1 or the IP address of 10.1.1.40 is changed to SO1 and an IP address of 10.1.1.20, you can save it. So it looks like we're good. I should be able to save this. And then we should be done with most of SO1's files. The only thing that we want to do is just change the resolver file. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to say vi etc resolve.conf or configuration and hit enter. And we see there's nothing there, but that's okay, because what we want to do is say this. Hit I to insert. We're going to say name server 10.1.1.20, because SO1 is the name server. And then we're going to say domain, and we're going to call it example.com. Hit escape, hit WQ to save whenever you're ready. And if you're wondering where I got that information, it's just right here. It's just basically saying here, on here, put this guy here. And then a little further down, it does tell us, where is it? There is one part where it tells us to put domain example in there. Come on, where am I? Here we are. That's all I've done. I've just put this at the bottom of name server. So when you're ready, hit enter, and you should now be done with SO1. The only thing that we'll want to do is just restart the service. So say service named restart, hit enter, and hopefully everything says okay. If it doesn't, that means one of your files has an error in it. There we go. I had all okays. So again, if there's any problems, you'll get failed, and it will try to give you an error, but good luck trying to find it. But if you did everything good, it will say okay, and now you can exit SO1, because we don't need to work with SO1 anymore. So there we go. So let's just really recap what we did. Basically, I've completed everything with SO1. I've made sure that is the primary. We call it the master, but it's the primary. There's no caching behavior. The recursion, we said no. We didn't have to worry about forwarding, because like I told you, it's just a setting that you have to put in, but we didn't have to do anything for it. It's just automatically no forwarding, so that's good. And then down here it says the configuration is very similar to the NS1 configuration, except we don't allow recursion, which we already talked about. So we're done. Everything on SO1 is done. It's perfect. It's good to go. We are now going to work on W01, which is probably the most confusing part for students. So we're going to go through this. But basically, remember, caching server is allowed. We're going to have a zone for the secondary. Okay, so SO1 is going to be the master, but W01 is going to be a secondary. And then it tells us our resolve configuration file must look like this. And just remember that example.co is actually example.com. And that error was there when I went through this program, so it's just remained there. But yeah, so we're going to do that, and here are our three restrictions. We want to make sure that we're only listening to the loopback interface. Like I said, it has a zone with type slave, for example, and it says limit the amount of memory we use for the DNS cache. I'm going to show you all of that. But besides for these three things, it's very similar to this configuration. So let's do it together. Alright, I'm in WO1 now, so I got rid of SO1. It's still in the background, which is what you want. You still want it here. But when it comes to this, we already installed bind. We didn't have to worry about bind utils. We can just start configuring our file. So let's just go back here and let's just begin with this all again. We're going to basically modify this file right here. So we're going to say vi etc named.conf. We get this whole thing again. So this is what we're going to do now. When it says listen on port 53, you remember that we had the loopback interface, or the IP address for the loopback, and then we put in originally on SO1, SO1's IP address. Here, remember what it says, we want to make sure we only listen to the loopback interface. So we're just going to leave this as is. We're not going to touch this at all. Then we're going to go down here and it says allow query. We still want to make sure we edit this one though. So hit insert, or I, and type in 10.1.1.0 / 24 space. Don't forget the semicolon. I promise you that's going to mess you up and you're going to hate it, but if you can put that in, you're going to be good. So we're still going to have the allow query 10.1.1.0 / 24. So there we go. We've done that. We've made sure it only listens on the loopback interface. Now it says we need a zone with type slave. Okay, so remember how we put this stuff here? Well, we don't have to do that anymore because that's already in the master. What we have to do is make a zone, for example, that's going to be type slave. And it's very similar to this, but I'm going to show you where I get this information from. Basically, actually I can do it on here. Let's just open new tab. That way I can actually copy and paste it. When you go into that link where he says it's an excellent tutorial, click on the link. And once it loads, we're going to scroll down, and I showed it to you already, but it's basically something that says secondary slave right here, or slave secondary DNS. If you click on this, you're going to see an example of what it looks like. One second. I think I clicked on the wrong thing. I apologize. Right here, I apologize. It's right here. Slave secondary DNS server. So there is something down here. You want to make sure that you're looking at DNS types. So when you click on this guy, there we go. That's what I wanted to see. So it looks like this. zoneexample.com in type slave. Then it says file. We're going to be creating a new file called sec.example.com. And then we just have one new thing that we're going to have, which is called masters. And you're just going to put down the SO1 IP address here. So what I'm going to do is copy this. You don't have to copy this guy up here because it's just comments and he's not going to look for that. Go to W01. You're still in insert mode, so just go down until you see the zone, which is right here. And I'm just going to make a new zone. So I'm going to hit enter, enter, hit edit, and paste. So there we go. So there is example. It's even giving us the right domain, so that's perfect. We don't even have to change that. Type slave, that's perfect. File, you can leave this the way it is. We'll create this file. We just have to make sure we create this folder sec first and then create the file. And then when it comes to masters, you're going to want to change the IP address. So we're going to change that to 10.1.1.20 because that's the master IP address. That's the SO1 virtual machine. And then we're almost done, but there's one last thing we have to do. In terms of this, we're done. But we have one final challenge, which is to limit the amount of memory we use for the DNS cache. Once again, I told you I did not find it in here. It might be in here, but I did not find it in there at all. So what I just did was I looked it up and I found it. It's called max cache size, and you can say bind. And if you look at this, this is what you need to do. Basically, it gives you all the information that you need. I'm just going to type it in. I'm not going to show you. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you the website I found it on. I'm just going to show you what it looks like in the virtual machine. So all you're going to do is go up here where it says recursion. So if you scroll all the way up, go to recursion where it says yes. Just make a new line. Hit enter. Try to line it up. And we're going to call it max cache size. So max dash cache dash size space, and then you can put in whatever you want. I'm going to say 5M for megabyte, and I'm going to make sure I put that semicolon there. So say max dash cache dash size space the number that you want. Don't make it big, so I would say 5 or 10 megabytes max. You probably don't even need that much. And then semicolon. Where I messed up the first time is I put a colon after size, but don't. Just make sure it looks exactly like this. Max dash cache dash size space a number, I put 5, and then capital M, and then semicolon. And that's all you have to do. Once you've done that, you've completed this, and you've completed this. So all the new stuff that you really need to make sure you know is all done. So now what we have to do is basically just go into W01, save this, so escape, WQ, we've saved it. Now let's create that folder that we need to create. So we're going to say make directory p var named sec. Hit enter, and then let's create that file. So we're going to say vi var named sec, and then we're going to make sure that we call it sec.example.com for secondary.example.com. Make sure you call it this because that's what we called it in our file, otherwise it's not going to work. So we're going to say sec.example.com, hit enter, and once again hit I for insert. We're just going to copy word for word all this information. Okay, so make sure you're on part C, and we're just going to copy this. Copy it, hit or edit, paste. Once again, let's just make sure we do our edits so it's not NS1. We're going to say SO1 here. Okay, instead of NS1 here, we're going to say SO1 here. Then instead of NS1 here, we're going to say SO1 here. And we're going to say 10.1.1.20, and that should be it. Everything else should be fine. So we can save this now whenever you're ready. Hit enter, and that's it. We're going to do one final thing, which is basically we don't have to do the reverse lookup. He doesn't ask us to do reverse lookup. It's probably good practice too, but he's not going to judge it on the actual script. We are going to make sure that we do the resolve the right way though, because that resolve file, remember, is going to be a little bit different. It's going to look like this, just with example.com. So let's just make sure we do that. So let's go into W01, say vi etc resolve.conf, enter. You're going to see a bunch of stuff here. This is where a lot of students forget there's a trick to this. So let's erase all of this. Hit insert, erase it all. We're going to say name server localhost, and then domain example.com, because that's what they wanted, right? Right here, that's exactly what they wanted. You're going to save this, but once we do that, we have to remember that we have a DHCP client that's basically allowing us to have an IP address that we can access the internet on for W01. What that means is that when we reboot this machine or reboot the network, it's going to override this file all the time, and we have to make sure that we don't override this file. We have this file exactly the way we want. So what we need to do is this. We need to say vi etc sysconfig network scripts if config eth0, and I'm saying eth0 because if I scroll up and look at the diagram, eth0 is W01's internet port. Okay, that's going to the black network. We're going to hit enter, and you're going to know all this stuff. But what you want to do is add a new line, and it's called peer DNS, and you're going to say equals no. What this option does is saying when you reboot this, do not change that resolve file. Let it be what it is. If you don't have this in here, every single time you reboot your machine, it's going to set it back to what it looked like before we erased everything and put it in. It's going to just keep on overwriting our file, and it's going to mess everything up. So make sure you put peer DNS equals no, and then save it. Okay? So now, what I suggest is do this. Say service named restart, and just see if we get any errors. We didn't. So that means we're probably in good shape. But what I'm going to suggest we do now is just reboot these machines. Okay? Shutdown R now. And if you want, you can do it with SO1 as well. The reason why I suggest you reboot it is that I've found that if you don't reboot it, sometimes the internet doesn't work on W01, and then once you reboot it, everything works just fine. So it's up to you, but I would say that it never hurts to reboot, especially if you've saved everything. We didn't get any errors, so that's typically a really good sign that everything is going to work. I have had it where you get failed, and you're like, oh God. But once everything does boot up, just remember that you have to boot up the service again. So you're going to have to say service named restart or start. I guess I should say start. There we go. Now it's started back up. We have to do the same for W01. So we're going to log in with user pass. Remember that root has to be the one to start the service. So when I go into system tools and terminal, I'm going to say su admin pass. Okay, and we're going to say service named and then start. That's good. Now one thing that we can do just to prove that this is working is we are going to edit the host files on both machines. So vi/etc/host, and we're going to get rid of these guys because now they're in our DNS records. We shouldn't need them, and we want to prove that they work. Okay, we'll do that again on SO1, so vi/etc/hosts. Get rid of these entries. We shouldn't need them. Okay, if you want, say service network restart. We'll see if that works. Service network restart. Oh, wrong thing. So that seemed to be good. And that seemed to be good. So everything should be working perfectly now. I'm just going to make sure named is up. It's all running. Keep on clicking on the wrong thing. I'm sorry. Service named status. It's running. So the time to check everything is now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ping each other. So I'm going to say ping count 3 SO1. Very good. It works. On SO1, ping C3 W01. Alright, that worked just fine. Now if I say ping C3 8.8.8, that's Google, I can't do it, but that's fine. SO1 should not have access to the internet. So this is the one that always it freaks me out because W1 should have access to the internet, and I have messed this up before. So we're going to try it. We're going to say ping C3 8.8.8, which is, or the 8.8.8.8, which is Google. We're going to hit enter and hope for the best. There we go. So we have internet. Everything is working. We don't have anything in our host files. This is how you complete the actual lab. So I know that this is difficult. Even as I was going through this, I was like, I don't know like if I'm explaining this well enough. But if you follow what I do, you should be good. In terms of whether this is on your test or not, I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. When I did my test, I don't think it was on the second test. We had 3 tests, and you only had to do 2 if you got really good on them, and then you didn't have to do the third. But I think that there were students that told me that DNS was on their actual last test. So I don't know for sure. You can ask your teacher if he knows, but I will say I feel for you guys. This is definitely the hardest lab out of all of them. It's hard even to explain, and you know, I'm still technically a student at Mohawk College, so me going through this with you, uh, like I said, there's still stuff where I'm like, I have no idea. I don't get it myself, but um, hopefully hopefully you at least saw all the things you had to do. Hopefully I gave you some good tips about how to copy and paste so that you don't have any problems, and hopefully I explained this good enough that you do complete this well. I'm going to show you what the graded script should look like. So we're going to go grading, click on the zip, say save. Then I can minimize this and we can say clear. Let's go into it. So CD downloads. We're going to unzip the host, and then we have to run it on both. So we're going to say first, let's run it. Okay, and then if we want, let's just see what that looks like on W01. So this is what it should look like for the W01 report. So we're going to have host name, W01, and the time that I did it. It's going to say SO1 lookup with W01. So it's basically going to try to look up SO1. And it looks like everything's good. We didn't get any problems here. And then it says SO1 lookup HP.com. This is, I think it was supposed to say W01 lookup, but basically it's going to go through here and it's going to look and it's going to find everything no problem. And that's what we want, because W01 should have access to ping other stuff on the internet like Google, in this case HP.com, and it should still be able to ping SO1. And it should be able to connect and find everything there. So this is the way that this should look. But now we have to do it on SO1 as well. So what we're going to, sorry about that, what we're going to do is we are going to basically say scp host.sh. We're going to put that to root at SO1, and we'll put it in the temp folder. Admin pass. Go into SO1. We're going to go into the temp folder. Run the script, SCP that over, so it's SO1 now, the report, to root at W01, and we'll put that in the temp folder. Admin pass. It'll still work if you get this possible break-in attempt. Don't worry about that. It'll still go. If I go into Alice here, we can see that if I go into temp, we'll see it. The SO1 reports there now, so no problems at all. So let's just run it, Firefox SO1 report, and this is what we get. So we say hostname SO1 at this time, which is perfect. SO1 lookup on W01. So now we're testing to see if SO1 can find W01 with example.com, and it can. There's no problems. It says SO1 lookup of HP.com. It should fail, and we can see that server can't find HP. So that's perfect. That's exactly what you want to see. And then it says SO1 lookup of 10.1.1.20, and we get that working no problem. And that's just basically doing the reverse lookup. So it's making sure that we put in that reverse lookup on the SO1 machine. So everything worked perfectly. This is exactly the way that we want it to look. So hopefully that really helps you. And again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. But again, I know this is a brutal lab, but I promise you the ones coming up from here aren't as difficult. There's still some challenging ones, but this is by far the hardest of the entire course. So good for you if you were able to figure this out. And like I said, anytime that I can help, I will definitely try. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help clarify anything. But with that being said, thank you again for watching my videos, and I will see you on the next video. All right, take it easy. Bye.